Hi guys, I'm Kevin from Strobepro.com, and today I'm going to show you guys the Godox ES45 LED panel. Now the ES stands for but you can use this for pretty much anything. You can kind of see where they were going with the esports angle. It has this sort of brushed metal aesthetic that looks really suspiciously like my MSI laptop. But I personally just think it looks pretty cool. So if this light ever does end up in frame, it's gonna look nice on camera, which, you know, is a bit of a plus, I suppose. But there are some other features in this light that were included with streamers in mind, namely the really unique control panel that can dock on the light or be used on your desk. And I'm gonna show you that in a second. So without any further ado, let's open this box up and see what's inside. So, not too much to unpack here. Let's talk about the first thing you're likely to notice, and that's the light itself. So it has that nice kind of brushed metal design that I mentioned. It also just feels really solid. I think they've done a great job with the design. The other thing I noticed is just how thin this is. Some other LED panels from Godox have battery options. You don't get that with this one, but I think they've saved a bit of real estate in the design, which is great if you're ever going to travel with it. Next up, on the back of the light, if you slide upwards, you can take off that detachable controller that I mentioned, and we're going to get more into this in a second. Next, power cables. Nothing too exciting there. You have your power block that plugs into the light, and then the wall plug that goes from there to the wall. Yours are going to look a little nicer because I've already opened this and played with it. Last but certainly not least, we have our desk mount. Now this is a great addition because if you are looking to do a simple desk setup, you don't have to buy any additional hardware. So to lock it onto a desk is pretty self-explanatory. You have this bolt which can expand or contract depending on how thick your desk is. So I'm just going to line it up here and loosen that. Now to tighten it, it's going to be counterclockwise from the top or clockwise from the bottom. There we go. Now, to mount the light, you actually have 4 mounting points. I think 2 would have sufficed. Basically, you just need to decide whether you want this mounted vertically or horizontally. If you go horizontal, I would recommend going into the bottom one, just so your light is the right side up. Anyway, that's what we're gonna do. What I would recommend is go over to your ball head here, and see this locking screw? We're just gonna loosen that. Now the ball head can move freely. On our light, I'm going to find my thread in the bottom there and line it up. And now what I can do, because the ball head is free, is I can just take this top plate and just twist it clockwise from the bottom until I have a snug fit. There's sort of a rubberized surface on there, so that will ensure it's going to stick nicely. And now that that's on there, I can orient my light however I'd like. If you find the sweet spot here in the ball head, you can go quite far down if you want to. I'm going to put just a slight angle on ours and lock the ball head. So before we move on, there's a pretty big disclaimer here. So if you were doing what I showed you and using this wheel to tighten onto the light, that's going to work most of the time, but there's something you have to be aware of. If I lock up the ball head, I can actually detach this plate. So if this plate was loose and I'm twisting it clockwise from the bottom to lock onto the light, I could actually be loosening the plate instead of tightening the screw into the bottom of the light. So that's something to be aware of. Make sure this is on really tight first, then when you release your ball head, you shouldn't have that problem. But just be extra careful and make sure you don't drop your light if it's not threaded on all the way. So now that my light is mounted, I can now also adjust the height. So you have 2 knobs here, and that just allows you to free the risers. So I've loosened this bottom one. I can raise it up. Now, I was actually kind of impressed with the height you get off of this. I got 1 more riser. It's going to go well out of frame now. So you can get that pretty high and pointed down. You might not have it at the maximum height, but this is great for getting your light up to a comfortable height where it's not right in your sight line. All right, guys, let's go through the operations of the ES45 now. So first things first, there's a DC input on this side. Really important that you plug your light in. Next up, there is a hard power switch on this side, so we got to flip that to on. Now you're going to see a battery indicator come up, and that's just telling you that the controller is being charged. Like I mentioned, it does have a built-in battery, so when it's docked on the light like this, it will be charging. To turn it on, we have the power button on the right here. I'm just going to press that, and there we go. And we have a bit of an interface in front of us. Now the controls for this light are very simple. On the right we have our brightness, and on the left we have our color temperature. Now I haven't mentioned this yet, but this is a bicolor LED light. So if I change this left knob, you can see I can warm up the light going down to 2800 Kelvin, or I can cool it as well, going up to 6500 Kelvin. Now, one thing about a bicolor light is there is a color temperature where this is going to be brightest. And the reason for that is half of the bulbs in here are that 6500 Kelvin temperature, and the other half are the 2800 Kelvin bulbs. So this is actually brightest right in the middle, which is 4100 Kelvin. And you probably saw a bit of change in illumination there. So this is where you're going to get the most power out of it. If you have no other lights in the room and you want to just set your white balance to 4100 Kelvin, that's where you're going to get the most power. To change the power up and down, you can see we're at 100%. I can adjust this knob. We can go all the way down to 0%. So a lot of adjustability there, which is nice when you're balancing this with other lights. So the other thing you're noticing is a channel and a letter there, which is our group. So you can use this controller to control multiple lights if you would want. And if you want to do that, all of your lights just need to be assigned to the same channel. And then if you want to differentiate between them, you can assign them to different groups. Now on the ES45, the way I would assign this light to a different channel or group is simply by changing the group or channel with the controller docked. So I can change this to channel 13 and group B if I want. And by the way, to cycle between those, I'm just short pressing the group channel button. And of course, once we have one highlighted, I can adjust it. But let's stay on 13. So what I've done now is I've actually just assigned this light to channel 13 and group B. So if I undock the controller, I retain control of my light. And you can see I'm able to dim it down. But if I was to change my group or channel, let's go to channel 14 and try to adjust my light, you'll see that nothing happens. So I have to go back to channel 13. There we go. And now I have control of my light again. So I guess the great thing about this interface is if you haven't paid much attention to the group and channel, you can just remove your controller and you're going to retain control of the light. But just be careful not to touch the group or channel, because if you accidentally change it, all of a sudden you're not going to be able to control it. Another thing I noticed is if we had, say, another light that's also on channel 13 but group A, and I wanted to control it, so I had my controller undocked and I switched over to A. So again, this is B. I could make some adjustments, do whatever I want, but as soon as I dock this back onto this light, you can see it reverts back to what it was assigned to. So that's just something to be aware of. You can see when I remove this, it retains the information that was updated from this light. It won't go back to A and whatever I had set for A. So just be aware of that. One last thing I have to show you here, there's a hidden menu. If I long press the group channel button, you're going to see this little display here. Now this is actually for use with the Godox Light app. The ES45 is compatible and it uses Bluetooth. Let's get back in there. So in order to pair my device, I can move this over to yes, and I can click that, and now it's in its pairing mode. You can see also the light's ID up in the left there. We'll go over the Godox Light app in detail shortly here, because a lot more Godox lights are starting to support it. And if you were going to control multiple lights from one interface, I think that's a much easier way of doing it than from this controller and fumbling around between the groups and channels that way. On that note, If you don't want to fiddle with menus, every ES45 of course comes with its own controller. So you can have one controller on the desk for each of your lights if you want, and that gives you a really tactile way of controlling them. Plus, extra buttons and dials on your desk just looks cool. You can see I'm lighting myself with just the one ES45 now. I've turned off every other light in the studio, just to give you an idea of what this looks like. Now, being a small LED panel, it's still going to be a relatively hard light source, but I'm impressed with how efficient the diffuser is. It's really even all the way across. Let's add in our second light here. Simple as that, touch of a button. You can see I'm a little warmer on this side. If I want, I can adjust my color temperature over here, create a bit of a differential. I'm not recommending that you do this necessarily, I'm just showing you one thing you can do. So yeah, having one controller per light really makes things simple, you don't have to think about it. I think it's a great option, and the more buttons and dials you can have on your desk, the more credibility you'll have. Trust me. Well, that just about wraps it up, guys. I hope you enjoyed our overview of the ES45. It's a great compact option, it's bicolor, it comes with mounting hardware, and this unique controller. So there's a lot to like here. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Kevin at Strobepro.com.